So, the final question for both of you is really what leadership advice you would give to those following you, right? And that might be to the many more women that are now joining the military. I think the numbers are up to 17, 18%. So, those numbers are climbing. And maybe also to women who find themselves to be in the minority around whatever table that they're in or in whatever career area that they find themselves in. What is some advice that you have for them?
Okay, I have to share a vignette about I was selected to go to senior service college. This is a big deal for O5s and potential to become a colonel, a full colonel. I got there and they put you into small groups, 16 people. I was the only female in that group. And the very first day, I was sitting there and we took a break. And the guys all went to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom. And I was alone. And they were talking and sharing and bonding. And I was not a part of that. Later that day, we were doing a discussion and somebody asked a question. I brought up a point and I said something. And they all said, and went on, but really didn't embrace whatever I said. Maybe an hour later, somebody made the exact same point. And it produced all kinds of discussion and, oh, that's a good idea. And yeah. And I realized that you really have to continue to fight to be recognized. You have to be yourself and you have to not let those kinds of incidents isolate you. Because more often than not, women are going to be a minority. So you need to be strong. You need to be out there. But in a leadership position, you have to allow yourself to be yourself. And I talked earlier about loving soldiers. You need to love your soldiers. You need to be able to be personable and you need to be able to reach out and touch them. And I have a terrible habit, even after all the sexual harassment things, about throwing my arm around a soldier and talking to them, and hugging them and talking to them. And I got to the point as a brigade commander, I'd always say, do you mind if I put my arm around you? So I didn't insult anybody, but be yourself, love your soldiers, take care of them, know their strengths and weaknesses, not soldiers, but people. Even in a corporate world, I was much more careful in a corporate world about throwing my arm around people, though. So, don't be afraid. Step up, know your craft, and be a part of it. I always tell Annette that she's normally the smartest person in the room, and she intimidates the hell out of people. But it doesn't stop her from speaking truth to power. If you want to know something, ask her. She'll tell you the answer. And that's probably her strongest quality. And with that, I'll end.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Annette, what about you?
She said all the great things to pass on. I was cracking up over your War College experience. I was the same thing. Only female in my group. We were wearing civilian clothes, so they didn't know until almost graduation that I was a baby 05. They were all 06s that had commanded brigades, tough guys. This is the years of OIF, OEF, where they were, combat tours, multiple, even though I did combat tours in their mind, it wasn't the same. But I guess because I started off very introverted, even though I would advocate for myself, I was introverted. The Army, for me at least, I had to make a decision. Was I going to be invisible and just that girl in the corner, or was I going to speak up? And so by the time I got to War College, I could care less if they all went to the bathroom together and BS'd and solved the world's problems when I wasn't there. Because when they came back, I'd say, what'd you talk about? And that's the difference of the atmosphere between when Mary was, truly breaking the ice for the follow-on generation of mine, right? And I remember my advisor said to me, at one point he said, we're supposed to have 2 women in each group. And that was from Mary's era, right? It's not fair. They need to have a, just someone that, we're using it sort of literal and, metaphorical, to go to the restroom with. You need someone that understands some of these nuances that you're experiencing. And they didn't have enough females that year. And he said they literally spent 2 days going through people's files and saying, what female could be in a class room with, 15 other, combat seasoned men and not file an EO complaint, or not feel like being bullied, or not intimidated. And he said, we pulled your file and said, she's going to be just fine. And I said, how could you tell that from a piece of paper, though? And he said, I said, what took you 2 days to talk about? And he said, well, you're only like 5 foot, 100 and something pounds. He said, there was a discussion over physical bearing. And Mary is, she thinks she's so big because she's an inch or so bigger than me. But, just hearing them go through that decision-making process, hindsight, and I was almost done with the course. They said, she'll be fine. And it probably is because I was born and raised under, 18th Airborne Corps, and then went to light infantry, and then had 3 combat tours by the time I got there. But you don't know that dynamic, right? And I didn't bat an eye about being the only female in the room from a very different perspective than Mary did. Mary, you didn't bat an eye because there weren't that many females. I didn't bat an eye because I don't want to be a man. I'm not one of the boys. That's not my desire. But I felt like I had a seat at the table. And so I didn't think about it because I'm always outnumbered. There aren't a lot of female officers. So anyway, when we talk about the mantle of leadership, sometimes it's the context of the environment that you're operating in and the legacies that are passed down generation to generation, as far as how do you keep some of the tradition, but also infuse some, contemporary updates into that environment. And so I think the bedrocks of what she said, as far as caring about your people, be authentic. I'm not a dude. I don't want to be a dude. I know some of my female peers were like, they really felt they had to fit in with the boys. You don't. You got to fit into where do you, where are you going? And your male peers, they'll support you. They can be your greatest advocates, but just be authentic. And then I would also offer, find a trusted sounding board, probably someone that you're not in the same unit with or whatever. Just someone who along the way has just can make you see a different perspective, because sometimes those guys doing that, they're not even thinking about, and I guess that's the point, they're not thinking about that Mary was left behind or going in a different direction. They're just oblivious to it. So how do you bring them back to the rest of the story? And I know people say this, and I'm going to sound like a cliche, and I don't mean it like that at all. But the mantle of leadership doesn't mean that you're perfect. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna make some bad decisions. You're going to fail, and it's gonna be personal embarrassment. It's gonna be such a letdown to the people you're trying to support. But I feel like part of growing as a leader is to acknowledge your failures and acknowledge those challenges and just learn for it and be compassionate but tough on yourself as well as your people. And failure sometimes is tragic. I'm not even going to try to sugarcoat it, but failure also can sometimes in the long run strategically turn out to be the greatest lesson that helps you go forward.